They say every day is for the thief, one day for the owner of the house. But ICPC, the Anti-Corruption Commission, has reversed the role. It is now every day for the owner of the house. If you're involved in bribery, over-invoicing, or any shady deal, the day of reckoning has come. ICPC, the Anti-Corruption Commission, is watching you. If you're reported for any corrupt practice, you'll be investigated, prosecuted, and punished. Corruption is harmful to our nation. Join the campaign against it by reporting any corrupt practice to ICPC, the Anti-Corruption Commission.
Let we join hands with ICPC, make them better.
Let's make Nigeria great again.
ICPC, they watch you.
And for corruption.
Break the chain of corruption now. Don't give, don't take. This message is brought to you by ICPC, the Anti-Corruption Commission.
Hello viewers, thank you for joining us on another exciting edition of Corruption Must Go. I am your host, Hawa Garba. The rising cost of governance has become a concern to many Nigerians, leading to a call for its reduction, especially as revenue is depleting. Several reasons have been cited as to why the cost is high and suggestions given on how it could be reduced. To lend a voice to the narrative, the Anti-Corruption Academy of Nigeria, ACAN, the training and research arm of ICPC, held a policy dialogue on corruption and cost of governance in Nigeria at the Commission's headquarters in Abuja recently. Today's edition will focus on details of the dialogue and the robust contributions from the distinguished personalities that constituted the panel. We will be back after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Over the years, the federal government has embarked on a couple of initiatives to block leakages and wastages of government resources while working on different ways to expand its revenue sources. The Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Dr. Zainab Ahmed, who was at the event, shared some of these initiatives and more.
It's no longer good that as a country we're facing a very tight fiscal challenge. While we're working on increasing revenue, we also need to look at how to reduce the high cost of government. We have significant drain in our resources from several sources. And I'm glad that it is ICPC that is taking this initiative because the natural mandate is to prevent corruption. While it is important to enforce measures where corruption has been identified, it is even more important to actually prevent corruption from happening. In the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, we designed a strategic revenue initiative, which is aimed at increasing our revenue efficiency, expanding our revenue sources, and increasing the quantum of revenue, but also reducing costs. And in reducing costs, we're taking a number of measures over a period of time, and most of them are targeted at automating processes that give room for things to go well. So we have the IPPIS, which the ICPC chairman has mentioned in his speech, that has enabled us to get a grip on the number of workers that government has employed. But because IPPIS is not fully implemented in the sense that the human resource module is still being developed, it is still possible for people to game the system. And you could have a situation where the civil servant has retired and he might still be on the IPPIS if somebody hasn't taken the pain to write a letter and make sure it gets to the IPPIS. So we're working very closely with the head of service to complete the process of linking the HR component of the HR module of the IPPIS so that the system becomes more effective. We are also using the DIGNIS system. I must say that almost all government agencies, apart from government-owned enterprises, are using the government integrated financial management system. That system enables us to send resources into the system of agencies, and also the expenditure of agencies are performed using the system. So whatever transaction you undertake is traceable, and there will be documents back in. But in December 2019, the chairman and members, we launched a system that we call the Transparency Portal. This Transparency Portal is aimed at exposing to the public the government transaction, because forgiveness is not something a citizen can access. This portal provides access to citizens, so you can log on to the portal and you can view any transaction that you choose from any agency, right down to the details of the transaction. What that was meant to do was to enable citizens to be able to see how government is performing on its transaction levels. And this became an excellent complement to the Budget Office website that has a citizens portal, where an interactive portal where you can actually send inquiries and actually get response. You also are able to see the details of the budget, including line-by-line details, as well as the performance of the budget, which is reviewed on a quarterly basis. But despite all of those measures, we still see government expenditure increasing at a rate much, much higher than our revenues are increasing. So we need to work together with all agencies of government to cut down on costs. We need to cut down on our payroll, we need to cut down on unnecessary expenditures that we can do without. Our budgets are replaced year in, year out with projects that you see over and over again. So we have to evolve the process to be able to check things. And also, projects that are not necessary or not important or the country should simply be removed from the expenditure plan, so that we use the resources that are limited to very important projects of government.
The policy dialogue and its attendant policy brief are part of ICPC's key performance indicators in the implementation of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy 2017 to 2021 and the Policies, Programs and Projects Audit Committee PPPAC Roadmap 2019 to 2023 adopted by the federal government at commencement of its second term in 2019. The chairman of ICPC, Professor Bolaji Owasonye, SAN, in his opening remarks, talks about the government's commitment to the PPAC document, ICPC's concerns, and more.
For us at ICPC, this is not only a stakeholder engagement, but also a key component of our prevention mandate, as we beam the searchlight on one of the drivers of corruption in Nigeria, which is the cost of government. In the PPPAC document, government committed itself to increase revenue from existing and new sources, to improve coordination and cohesion amongst agencies in the revenue generating and expenditure ecosystem, to drastically cut costs, including reducing all kinds of subsidies, while protecting the poor and vulnerable, to reduce the cost of delivering government services by streamlining payroll, reducing cost of contracts and procurement, and improve coordination and avoid duplication of efforts by MDAs. ICPC ongoing investigation of some MDAs indicate that government ought to urgently take stock of the areas of potential savings from budget abuse in order to forestall continuation of the practice. The second area of concern is payroll padding and the phenomenon of ghost workers and abuse of recruitment. From ICPC findings, for example, from health and medical institutions, many agencies still engage in unapproved recruitment without obtaining the consent of all relevant organs of government. It would appear that such malfeasance enjoys the cooperation of a few unscrupulous elements in IPs. Happily, government is looking closely at this towards corrective measures, and ICPC is a part of that process. A third quick example is project duplication. Thousands of projects are repeated annually in the budget without diligence scrutiny of need, implementation, or otherwise. Some are duplicated as annual zonal intervention projects, otherwise called constituency projects of the legislature, while also featuring as projects of the executive. Funding is released for both insertions without any mechanism for monitoring and evaluation and reconciliation of funding.
Corruption can mess up every good thing a nation has. A nation is blessed with every good thing all around. If you and I care, we gonna get there. Just ask me how. It starts from you and I. Make you say no. When they give you bribe or ask you for bribe, make you say no. If you're there for office and tempted to steal, make you say no. We can only kill corruption and greed. Make we say no. Make we say no. Make we say no. Make you say no. When they give you bribe or ask you for bribe, make you say no. If you're there for office and tempted to steal, make you say no. We can only kill corruption and greed. When we say no. When we say no. When we say no. When we say no.
Welcome back. You are still watching Corruption Must Go. In addition to his responsibility of declaring the event open, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, who spoke through the Permanent Secretary, Political and Economy Affairs, Office of the SGF, Mr. David Adejo, said that the federal government was determined to reduce cost of governance through the harmonization of ministries, departments, and agencies.
Government cannot and must not in any way incur available costs in governance to the detriment of providing services to these people. It is for this reason that early in the life of the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, a good number of areas were identified to cost of governance and make resources available for the socio-economic development and Nigerian empowerment of its citizens. The focus of government is to ensure that the cost of governance is not disproportionately higher than the cost of productivity, and this has informed various policy trusts, which some of them which the Honorable Minister has mentioned. Of course, government is also working towards ensuring that ministries, extra-ministerial departments and agencies at the federal level are synchronized to the optimal level of necessity for efficient and effective service delivery.
Speaking at the event, the head of civil service of the Federation, Dr. Folashade Yemi Eson, who was represented by Mr. D.O. Omogo, said, amongst other things, that they were committed to the efforts of the government to reduce the cost of governance at all levels.
Statutorily, the Office of the Head of Service has the responsibility of designing structures, which is very, very important, because the structure of an organization has cost implications. More so, that office has the responsibility of appraising the conditions of service of all government agencies so as to be in line with government extant rules. The office also has the first rule in granting waiver for recruitment into the public service. With this, it is obvious that the Office of the Head of Service has a significant role to play in determining cost of governance in the administration.
ICPC salutes all the people at the front line of the COVID-19 fight. We also salute you for saying no to corruption and yes to integrity. Together, we shall overcome. Report acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800-2255-4272. This message is from ICPC and NTA.
You are still watching Corruption Must Go. The legislature was not left out in the dialogue as the Senate President, Dr. Ahmed Ibrahim Lawan, who spoke through the Chairman, Anti-Corruption and Financial Crimes Committee of the Senate, Senator Suleiman Abdukwari, decried the increase in corruption despite concerted effort to stem it, and stressed the need for critical and systemic thinking to arrest the situation. A major aspect of the event was the technical section, which was anchored by Professor Uche Nwaleke. In his presentation, the Director General of the Budget Office of the Federation, Mr. Ben Akabweze, observed that yearly budget performance reports at all levels show a higher recurrent expenditure, which calls for a reduction of expenses, especially as sources of revenue has waned.
Year in, year out, we see our budgets at the federal level, and even worse at the, some of the state levels, and definitely so at the local government level. We see that government spending is largely focused on recurrent activities. We also, year in, year out, the landscape is replete with, stories about our practices in governance. And so these calls for reduction of cost of governance in Nigeria have been persistent, okay? Understandably because of the impact on the government's fiscal situation. Perhaps in more buoyant times in the past, we didn't seem to worry too much about it, but of course as we fall on leaner times, it's even of a greater concern.
Mr. Akabweze spoke extensively on drivers and effects of rising cost of governance and preferred solution to reducing the cost of governance.
In addition to our recurrent costs rising on the face of it, what we also find is that even within our capital cost, that 25% that is capital cost, MDAs manage to make in recurrent expenditure masquerading as capital expenditure, and so the quality of spending is also could also be better, and that translates effectively to higher costs. We have constitutional issues that make us also that impose constraints. For instance, the 1999 Constitution mandates the President to appoint at least 36 states, and today we have 43. Then we have more still ministries and extra-ministerial bodies. We need to look at the civil service, and basically just the civil service needs to be restructured, and so that we can make it more efficient and have the right sort of jobs and provide the right sort of remuneration. The remuneration structure in the core service as the civil service is simply a joke if we're serious about fighting corruption.
Also speaking at the session, Mr. Soji Apampa, CEO, Convention on Business Integrity, spoke on the role of the private sector, while Dr. Ike Ezeogo, who represented Ahmed Isa of Brekete Family Radio, spoke on the role of the media and civil society organization. Let us hear them.
Let me go a route that most people won't even talk about, and it is in the subversion of regulatory oversight. Because many actors in the private sector try to capture their regulator. And once they've captured their regulator, through corrupt means, they're able to capture a larger slice of the market than should normally have come to them. But on the indirect side, I think service delivery, which affects everybody because the private sector pays unduly for running its operations because it has to provide its own electricity, its own water, depending on the type of services that they're providing. And you find that, so services that ought to have been provided, when the money is diverted and it doesn't go to what it's supposed to do, everybody suffers. So even the same private sector that aids and abets is a victim as well of the corruption.
Media does not get involved in the fight against corruption. I don't think it will be very successful if it's going to ever be easy. So there is need for media involvement, and not just involvement, with serious commitment to the fight against corruption. Why? Because there is an aspect of social orientation that will be driven by the media.
And then the media also can use their platform to give voice to the voiceless victims of corruption. Just like as my colleague have just said that they are also, the private sector are victims of corruption as well as a problem in some cases. There are cases where people become victims of corruption and they don't know where to go. They have nobody to help them to expose that corruption. And the biggest killer for corruption is exposure of the wound. Once corruption is covered, it can never heal.
In his presentation of the highlights of draft policy considerations on the theme, Senior Research Fellow at the Academy, Professor Isaac Obasi, recommended a drastic reduction of the high overhead expenditure in order to curtail the prevailing high fiscal deficit, as well as the need to review the cost incentive aspects of Nigeria's presidential system of government, amongst others.
Everything we are doing here is on corruption. We are not saying that there are no other drivers of cost of governance. The essence of this policy dialogue is to flag corruption as a major driver of that. That does not show that there are no other factors. And that's why the recommendations are divided into two parts. The one on curbing corruption focuses on strengthening the office of the Auditor General of the Federation. Secondly, making sure that the reports are used, they come out promptly, timely, in such a way that are used to catch perpetrators of corruption at that time it is happening.
In his closing remarks, the acting provost of Akan, Professor Tunde Babawale, said the country would make significant progress if the wasteful practices of duplication of functions of MDAs, embezzlement of public funds, kickbacks from contracts, procurement fraud, diversion of public funds into private hands can be curbed. That is all we can take on today's edition of the program. Remember that you can watch this edition and others on our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/ICPC Nigeria. You can also visit our website, www.icpc.gov.ng. For updates on our activities, complaints or suggestions, follow us on our various social media platforms on the handles showing on your screen. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.